Welcome to the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter. This is our Thursday evening study group. Today is May 2nd of 2024. This is our 118th study group. Today we have an interview with Lynn Baumeister. She's going to talk to us about UX and UI for business analysts. My name is Thea Soren. I am the Vice President of Career and Professional Development for our chapter. It is my job to help you learn what you want to learn. So if you're interested in learning about certification through the International Institute of Business Analysis, if you need user stories or use cases reviewed, if you want to know what it takes to get to be a business analyst, reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'm happy to help. We are a volunteer-led organization. You'll see Cliff there in his Millennium Falcon. He's our president. Yulia is our vice president of finance. Uche, Vivian, Esther, and Alicia are our board members at large. And our mission here is to help you learn business analysis, make your life better. Whatever it takes, we're here to help you. We have a worldwide audience. And one reason for that is we don't charge money. We don't charge money for our study groups. We don't charge money for our special events. We want you to get the help that you want. And so we are here to lift you up. If you're interested in participating, reach out to us. If you do not have an IIBA chapter home, you are welcome to join us no matter where you live in the entire world. We have members from Africa, the Philippines, all over the place. We're here to help you. We don't care where you live. We have given you several ways to reach us. Again, this is our Thursday evening study group from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, USA. We also have a couple of LinkedIn groups. We have Meetup. We have our Zoom online. That blue text there is the same every single week. We have a Google Docs study materials, which are documents that people have created for their own study that they have contributed to our list, as well as a whole list of where our meeting recordings are on YouTube. Meetings are recorded, and the YouTube address you can see there on the bottom of the screen. We also have an IIBA website. If you're interested in reaching out to us, we are happy to talk to you. We are mostly focused on the top 3 certifications. These are the 3 certifications that come from studying the BABOK, the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge. The 4 certifications at the bottom are the advanced certifications that you can earn. If you're interested in any of these or want to know more about those, reach out to me on LinkedIn. We like to celebrate our wins. We've had some people that have reached out to us that said because of this study group, because of the recordings or the participation in the live meetings, we have been able to pass our certifications. We are thrilled. We want to know, this is the way we get paid. We get your appreciation that we are doing a good job. So our most recent person is Esther. Esther is one of our board members at large. She has also become one of our advisors. These advisors, Esther, Yulia, Uche, and Bob, are here on a regular basis, and we so much appreciate them. The reason that they're here is because their attendance in this study group means that you get an hour of education credit for participating. So if you're using a telephone to come into this meeting and it doesn't have your full name, please put your full name in the chat and say, I'm here to participate, so that we can be sure that we record that and give you credit, and you get that hour of education credit because you need it whenever you apply for your certification. Watermark Learning has given us a discount code. The discount code is Tampa-21, which gives you 20% off on all of their products. They have not only business analysis products, but project management and a couple of others. They have meetings that are live education training. They have meetings on demand. They have study groups. They have practice test questions separated into the different chapters of the BABOK. Welcome to reach out to them anytime you need. Tonight, Lynn is going to talk to us about UX and UI. Every business analyst needs to understand this. If you don't have someone that manages this for your organization, you are responsible for managing it. If you do, you need to know how to talk to these folks. Lynn comes to us from academia, and I'm very excited to get her perspective on the things that we have not even considered about UX UI. Next week, I'm going to be talking about building your best toolkit. This is the speech, the talk that Heather and I gave at Building Business, the BBC meeting that we had not very long ago. It went over very well, and it has some things that you've heard pieces of, but it also has some things you've never heard before. And so I'm excited about bringing that to you. The next weeks, we're going to start talking about the BABOK. This is practice test questions. We're going to go through a chapter at a time. We also are going to give you links to at least 4 hours of previous meetings that we have gone through the practice test questions. It is critical that before you come to one of these meetings that you have read the chapter. It would be beneficial if you also go through the links of those practice test question recordings. And then whenever you come to the meeting, we're going to go through 25 questions. Out of that chapter, I'm going to read the question. I'm going to read each of the 4 answers. Then we're going to have a discussion. The discussion is what makes it valuable. We talk about why this answer cannot be the right answer, what the word is that is not even in the BABOK, which answer is the best answer according to the BABOK, and if we disagree, we're going to find out why that is the best answer. One note of Watermark has given me a way to let them know if any of their questions are not perfect. So if they need improvement, I have a way for them to get that information, and then we will make it better for everyone. Okay, so I'm going to turn the screen back over, and I'm sorry, I'm going to let Bob say something real quick.
I just wanted to say, back when I still had a nervous system and started swing dancing in 2001, I met Lynn, who was not an actual human. She was this semi-mystical deity that kind of descended from the dark, mysterious depths of Maryland someplace to come in and dance and sometimes teach. She taught with the legendary Frankie Manning, for example. It was like a master of Lindy Hop. She has a lifetime of experience doing almost every kind of international folk dance imaginable. And then I found out she went to the same school as me, has more degrees than me, in an amazing subspecialty. So I always thought she was just stupidly impressive. And I'm super excited to have her address you on this area we have not addressed heretofore in our study session. So welcome, Lynn. I'm glad that we're finally making this happen.
Yeah, Bob actually talked to me about this talk probably about 18 months ago at least. And it just kept getting sort of pushed off. And I finally said, if we actually get a date on the calendar, it'll get done. So that's what we did. And in fact, that slid up to the top of the to-do list. One thing I'll say, right, is I'll be coming at things from probably a somewhat different perspective. So sometimes I may be using jargon where you're going, oh, right? Because you also have your own internal jargon, but I hope as we're going along, there might be some small conversations to make sure that we sort of find that meeting ground between things. I also know from previous experience that I am unable to concentrate on the chat. So my plan is to stop at various points in time and kind of say, are there any questions? Pause long enough that people have time to, to unmute, ask the question, or things are coming in through chat. So I'm assuming that someone, or Bob, right, that you'll be monitoring what's going on the chat to see if any questions are coming in. If you do want to put something into the chat, if it refers to a particular slide, I do have slide numbers. So you can go ahead and, because I might, might have stopped after slide 7 and you had something on slide 3 that you'd like me to go back and refer to. Okay, now I press the share screen button. I will say, in my line of work, one of the can I say a good thing came out of the pandemic? A lot more
Yes,
people are
we can.
familiar with Zoom, and for me, running usability test sessions with people in other cities and other locations suddenly became much easier. So I no longer had to spend 10 minutes at the start of a session trying to tell people how to use Zoom. People now know it. So I think you're all seeing some things to think about. True?
Yes, we are. Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So what this is kind of just a dump out of my head of that when I come into projects, the questions I find myself asking, making inquiries about, and sometimes I find people have the answers, and sometimes they're going, oh, we don't really know what's going on about that. So it's kind of a bit, hodgepodge isn't quite the right term, but there's various, like I said, things that I find people haven't really considered all the way through. My background, as Bob alluded to, we both went to Carnegie Mellon. I did a late in life master's in human-computer interaction. Before that, I actually worked as a programmer, and I can't use the word web developer because when I was working as a programmer, there weren't a whole lot of web applications. So they were all you know, on your desktop, or even before that, dare I say. So I did a late in life master's and then promptly went right into being a consultant. I worked for a consulting company for 2 or 3 years, and then there was kind of a failure in the dot-com boom, and I got laid off. And at that point, I went looking for work on my own. And so I've been consulting on my own since about 2003. Expertise I'd put, so user research, user interface design, usability testing. A lot of my work has been at the federal level. Sometimes actually, like for the FDA, that was actually the FDA website. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I've worked for other institutes within the National Institutes of Health, which is what the National Human Genome Research Institute. There's also a National Cancer Institute. There's a whole bunch of institutes there. I've done work for various different parts of them. These two here, these two bullets, part of the IMPC and SCGE, those are examples of doing work for projects that have a very, very specialized audience. Those are those are for people working in very definite science research areas. Center for Civic Design works on elections. It's nonpartisan. That the goal is to make sure that all the information around elections is clear such that people can vote how they intended to without being confused by ballot design, voter guides, etc. So let's talk about, UX, interesting. Hold on. Zoom is covering part of my screen. Can I make that go away? No, okay. I'll have to remember what's in the top area. So UX, user experience, there's a lot of other job titles, roles you might hear. Human factors engineer tends to be a slightly older term. You can kind of see, right, if you look at this list, they're kind of mixing and matching various different words: user experience, researcher, engineer, information architect. Those are all things that kind of fall into this field. If you were looking for jobs, you would certainly see these and probably some other ones that I haven't even thought of. It's a growing field. You've got people with a full set of credentials, right? I did a 15-month master's program. There's other people who perhaps are, getting a degree in information technology or computer science or something along those lines. And maybe one of the courses they took as part of their undergraduate or their graduate work was a course in user experience, usability, information design. There's also lots of weekend workshops where people come in and just kind of really deep dive for a weekend to get a handle on the field. It's a changing field. Usability testing used to be a big, expensive operation. And now there's the concept of doing incremental testing, informal testing, that getting some end user input is better than none. End user, perhaps a jargon term, but it's basically who's using the thing that you're working on building. You're looking for people with UX expertise. There's the User Experience Professional Association. There's also the Society for Technical Communication, that's a big long word there. Yeah, Usability and User Experience Special Interest Group are some places you can you can be looking. And again, right, user experience is what's it like to use it. And it can be, in some ways you could almost describe it as anything that's got a screen that you're interacting with. Digital product, website, web application, mobile app, etc. Right, and these are now, right, all over the place, in the workplace, in our private lives.
Lynn, I have a question.
Yep.
We had originally been told that UX would extend to everything, including packaging and the use of products. Is it only websites?
So I would say that you've got people who are working sort of more with the, so the things you mentioned have more sort of a physical aspect.
Mhm.
In my experience, so I sort of have to use that word experience there. In my experience, user experience has tended to be more things with screens, but you know, if you look at those two words together, it could really be more broadly applied. But my guess is if you were looking at, for instance, job titles and so on, for people who are looking at sort of more that broader and perhaps dealing with even what, you know, a handheld remote controller, like how it feels in your hands such that you can reach everything. That's probably going to be more in the human sort of human factors area. My guess is you'd see some slightly different roles or job titles. Does that answer your
Okay. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mm.
In other
Similar
words,
to
every
designing a
company's
car.
gonna have, every company's going to have their own titles, but it's going to be something around this.
Right. So you might have somebody who's thinking about when you're in the car, what can you reach? Height of the seatbelt. So there's also that tends to fall, I think, in the universe of ergonomics, some of that,
Okay.
in terms of how comfortable things are.
Aircraft controls in cockpits, they can get wild.
Yes. What problem is UX trying to solve? There's often a disconnect between what gets built and people's ability to use it. And we all know this, right? Because you've all, let's say, pick on websites, right? You've all been on websites where you're banging your head against the wall. You know, three important pieces of that is, you know, I think the user research, and that's understanding what end users need. I have found when I've come into projects that it doesn't always align with what the project leaders, the marketing department think end users need. There's sometimes a little bit of a disconnect between those two. Understanding that, then right, you're looking at user interface design where you're laying out what your screens look like, what the flows look like. Usability testing for iterative improvement, and I really want to emphasize that iterative, that you can get that into your, right? So if you're working in Agile, if you can get iterative testing into those sprint cycles, that can help you improve products. I like that, works great, right? So here we have the happy people. They built the product. They were given some functional requirements. It has to do this and this and this and this and this. They've got a development cycle going on. They've got a quality assurance testing team that says, yes, it does all these things. And they say, perfect. And then you've got Rio, they're looking at the product, and for them, they just can't imagine somebody not knowing certain things. And the reality is pretty much for anything, you're going to have multiple aspects, right? So there's some, you know, within one product, website, web application, you know, even the console that's in your car, if you've got a newer car, right? There's some things that are very straightforward. You go in there, you can figure out how to do it. My examples here, right? You've got you know, when you go to check in at your doctor's office, you know, when they're looking up, they ask for your last name, right, and your date of birth. Maybe that's easy peasy. At updating your contact information, easy. Viewing diagnostic images, easy peasy. Maybe sending diagnostic images to another provider is tricky. You're not quite sure where to start, or you know where to start, and then you're sort of not quite sure that you're going down the right path as you do it. And you can have other things that are just really, really difficult, or people just can't figure out how to do. I know when I'm watching people use a website, when I see them flipping between screens, that's often an indication that there's some issue that they perhaps can't even articulate, but there's some reason that they're needing to flip between those two screens. And especially if you're asking people to remember something that they then need to type in someplace else. So again, the main concept here is not like the product itself is great or the product itself sucks, right? There's going to be different aspects of it if you're building anything with any complexity. So the big thing I want to say, the more you know about your end users, you can build a better interface. Don't design and build in a vacuum. Unless it's a spaceship. Can I make that joke since we have the Millennium Falcon there?
Yes, you can.
The first class I walked into when I was starting my master's is they just said, "You're not the user." So, like, your opinion doesn't matter here. You need to know who you're building for. Now, it might be if you're building something for business analysts or something that everybody can use. I mean, it might be that you are one of the end users, but chances are there's also other people that kind of don't match your particular characteristics. So you kind of want to be able to distance yourself a little bit. These are sort of loose definitions. I think we all know this is kind of fluid. I tend to think of a website as being static information plus dynamic information. So we take it rei.com, like sells camping equipment. You got static pages, the return policy, the origins of REI, how it got started, how you go about returning something. Maybe they've got some pages on, how to pick a tent. Things to think about when you're looking at sleeping bags, static. And then they've got, when you actually go look at the products, that's being pulled from a database. So what you see this month, it's going to be different than what you see next month. Web application, right? A software program that's accessed through a web browser, more functionality focused. And I tend to be talking about these things just because this is the sort of thing I have worked on. So any place, right, you walk in and someone's sitting in front of a screen, especially in any kind of work environment, right, chances are it's some sort of web application, doctor's office, the reception desk, checking you in, you call about your credit card, right, the person that you're talking to who is looking up your account, their ability to make changes, for, answer your questions, etc. Some sort of web application. Sometimes they can be small things that are very focused, right? There's often, right, these standalone applications, which is where you enter your timesheet hours. Students setting their class schedule. And then there's a lot of things that are both, right? So there's a lot of websites where you've got static pages plus dynamic information pulled from a database plus web applications, right? So eBay, Amazon, any place that you're shopping online, right? At some point, you're doing a handoff to a web application, which is what's going to handle taking in the credit card, letting you edit the shopping cart, etc. Let me just stop and see if people have questions for me yet.
Not yet. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to voice? Well, let me ask Lynn, if you don't have someone who's doing UI and UX for your organization, and we are the business analysts, what things do we need to be aware of? Are you going to cover that later, or is that something you want to talk about now?
I think we're about to get into that.
Okay.
So after I've been through some slides, let's see if I actually get those questions answered. So one important question is, what platform and screen size is the end user going to be using? Like, let's take the airplane cockpit. The airplane cockpit actually has at this point some digital displays in the newer airplanes. Your car, if you have a newer car, right, has a digital display. So those are very specialized, but you may end up working on something like that. You've got mobile, you've got your laptop screen, tablet screen, large monitor, all of the above. I have been on projects where people have said, has to be mobile friendly, and I've said, well, let's talk about that. Give me your use cases. Give me your examples of when you would expect someone to be accessing something like that. Can we actually go there? Let's go there. So
Yeah, we found when it comes to something like that, mobile excessive or ability, tell us what they would want to do, because you have to scale back a mobile app so much if you do it right. You can't put the same thing on a 27-inch screen that you can on a 6-inch, Google Pixel.
So the end users for this particular website, they're researchers, they're grad students, they're in a research lab, or they're at a university. They have at least one large monitor. They might sometimes be at home and accessing it on their laptop, but that's pretty much as small as they're going to get. Right, if you take a look down here, right? This is just, it's not going to be like, there's no reason to present this in a mobile setting.
Right.
So it's always, and I think, right, Cliff, what you were just referring to, that didn't work. There we go. I was trying to click. That maybe not all of it needs to be mobile friendly. Maybe there's, what do you expect people to use on the go?
Yep. When mobile first came out, they started saying you do development for mobile first, and then you build out from there, because trying to go the other way is really hard. I don't know if that's still the case, but I bet you. Yes, Bob.
I can go in the reverse direction from that. A company that was a competitor of an older company of mine made an entire suite of HVAC and building access controls. And they started from area and unit controllers that controlled very small things that were set up from a desktop UI that could reach out across the network and configure things. But then they also developed UIs for all the individual components. And then they added mobile that had access to and control of smaller things. So they definitely went from large to small in that direction. And the kind of UI you need will be driven by the needs of the application.
Interesting.
So for instance, in the background coding, there's ways that you can call it, what's the word, responsive design, such that as something gets smaller, right, you'll all of a sudden see it as you take something that's on your nice fat monitor screen, right, and you take it and you squeeze it, you'll see it all of a sudden flip into what mobile mode. Because it recognizes that the display area that it's in is quite limited, and often, right, your main navigation things now go on to what's called the hamburger menu when you have those 3 lines that you're buying your hamburger.
Lynn, I don't know if they still do this. Whenever I first got into web development, they talked about hamburger menu, and I understood that. The other menu, they call it a hot dog menu. Is it still called that?
I have not heard the word hot dog menu.
I thought it was probably something they made up there. Okay,
Does make
good
me
to
laugh.
know. It's pretty funny.
Food oriented.
Yes.
So these are essentially, right, I think, right, from your role as, right, the business analyst, bringing these questions to the foreground to make sure that they're being thought about and considered, that there's not a knee-jerk, everything has to be mobile, that there's consideration of what needs to be mobile. And I think this is really important to know. So a lot of projects are about replacing an existing system. And sometimes there's going to be new functionality added, but the existing system can give you a wealth of information about your end users and what's going on with it. So I think pushing for this, right? So you want to know what's working well. Like Someone might tell you, I use this function every single day. It's the first thing I do in the morning. I have to get it out by 10 o'clock. Don't take this away, otherwise I won't be able to do my job properly. You want to know about that. So there's the both, you know, the thing that they use and why. You know, reports have to be out by midnight, whatever it is. And also, what are the current pain points? And again, it's the why. So if someone simply says, oh, it's hard to use, that is zero information. All right, it is a little bit information, but it's nothing you can really work with. You really need to understand why. And so these are examples of what I have. We have the ABC reports. They only run it once a year. They're successful. They think, I'll remember that in 12 months. They come back and they're like, I don't know. They're feeling, they forget how to do it. Even if they took notes, they took some written notes, but they didn't take screenshots. Or worse, they took notes, they did take screenshots, they were really diligent, and then the user interface changed on them. There's some forms that they're not sure that they're filling out accurately due to the labels and the prompts in the fields. They're just not quite sure what they're supposed to put in there. Knowing what functionality gets used daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, because for the folks, whoever is doing the user interface design, that can kind of inform, where you need to do more hand holding, things that get used less frequently. The time urgency on things, right? Those all will eventually feed into the user interface design.
Lynn, is there an application that will monitor what's used when and what interfaces are used? For instance, 40% of our access is through a Apple mobile device, or these are the fields that most people click on.
So the answer is it depends. Certain websites can plug into Google Analytics, which will provide that kind of information, so you can kind of see where people are coming from. It's been a while since I've looked at one of those reports. So it really depends on what the particular, whoever you're working with, for what they have set up kind of at the back end to track that kind of information. So sometimes the answer is they have zero idea. And sometimes that they can actually give you some of that, because there's some other information. I think I have a slide on some of this later on. What sort of search terms are people entering into the browser, entering into the search of the website or web application? Sometimes you can get information on how people are accessing the site, which is, do they tend to come in through the home page, or are they parachuting in? That's an official technical term, right? Which is when you've done an internet search and you don't land on the home page, you land on something that's your internet search engine thinks where you want to be, Bob.
Super high traffic websites tend to instrument and record data for everything. Paths of mouse movement, where you come from, what you click on, how long you look at things, and every single bit of that can be made use of. There's also A/B testing and so on, which I'm sure you'll cover.
So think about that kind of data, right? That's the kind of data that you need to ask for. And sometimes I've asked for it, then they've given me kind of raw data files. I've had to say, can you help me interpret this? Because this is just too raw. So you need somebody who actually understands what all the information is. So that's an example of information that you can ask for that will help give an idea of what's going on, right? Seeing if you've got search terms that come up all the time, that may indicate that this is something that people can't find easily when they are just looking at the website and trying to figure out where something is. There's also something called the bounce rate, which is when people hit a page and bounce out right away. That's not necessarily, bouncing out is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Think about when you do an internet search, you try the first one that comes up to the top, you look at it, right? You bounce out. So if someone has correctly figured out that they landed on your website and it's not the right place, it's actually a good thing that they bounce out. Other things to think about and ask about. Again, and this has to do with these are all things that would affect the user interface design. Yeah, so whoever is working on the user interface design, you have high turnover in your end users. So if you have people doing low pay plus high stress, call centers, for instance, right, where they've got customers yelling at them, they may not be there for very long. And so it may be that that kind of user interface to help keep errors from being made, right? You want to have, again, more hand holding and prompts and just hand holding in the user interface to help people know where to go and what to look up. You can have other high stress situations, ambulance, fire stations, emergency room, airplane cockpit, perhaps.
I worked at a nuclear power plant. There are some times that they have high stress situations. And then they have drills.
I simulated them. So,
Hopefully they're just simulations.
well, the point is that you can train for crazy situations that should never happen. Because 3 Mile Island, if the operators had just walked away, they'd have been fine. But they lost situational awareness because a bunch of things stacked up on top of each other. So there's a lot that goes into these.
Is there functionality that's error prone? That, and these are all, I think these are questions that you can bring to whoever you're working with. You might have, staff does this, but they're always making this mistake when they're updating client records. All stuff that's useful to know when you're doing a redesign, so then you can try and arrange it to, you can try and make the user interface design mitigate those kinds of things. You have staff that's processing forms that people have submitted over the website, and there's particular fields that always get filled out incorrectly most of the time. And so then, right, staff has to then call the client back and get clarification, right? So then there's these delays. So this is all information that's going to, this is what I call the user research, which eventually feeds into your user interface design. Speaking of nuclear power plants, right, is there a potential of doing harm? There are papers that are written that talk about when you have web applications, anything on a screen, right, that if the people in high stress situations, the less stuff that's on the screen, so you're really making them focus on just what they need at that moment, that's preferred versus having a lot of stuff on the screen where they're having to figure out what to do. It's also worth checking what's going on. Sometimes there's an IT help desk, or there's a feedback forum. There's something like that within the company where when people have questions or complaints, you can see that email stream, or what's going on with the if things are coming in via the phone. You could ask to see that information. Again, they might just give you raw data, and I would say feel free to push back and see if you can help interpreting what you're seeing. So this, the goal here is understanding end users and what's going on with the current system, what it is that you're trying to build.
So Lynn, what I think I just heard is understand the current state before you try to develop future state.
Yep.
One of the things that I discovered in one of my most recent database moves is when we were doing the analytics on each of the fields, people would just put in, it was a required field, so they would just put junk in there. There was nothing to determine that this was appropriate junk. Nobody at nobody.com was in too many places. First name was in the first name field, last name was in the last name field, but they had no reason to make it better. So we had to figure out a reason to motivate them to make it better rather than just put something in the field.
And there are ways to limit the format and content of pages or different fields, and you can actually test them after every keystroke to change the display based on whether the format is acceptable or not.
I agree.
This is the thing we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Which is understanding people's starting points.
Mhm.
So if it's a login required, when I log into my bank's website, to see my account information, they are controlling that start page. I can't parachute in from some other place, right? But no login required. People might start on the home page. I certainly have some bookmarks that are the home page of whatever website I've decided was useful enough for me to bookmark it. But right, they might be landing on a sub page and proceeding from there. So they might bounce out, quick look around. This is not what I think I need. Right, and those links can come from all sorts of places, right? An email, a text, might be coming from an internet search, might be bookmarked. And the reason why it matters when you're working through the user interface, one of the things that you're considering is if someone parachutes in, can they kind of, like, if this page isn't quite it, but they think they're still close to what they want, does the rest of the information on the page help them figure out, yeah, I just need to go over to this other page, and that'll be the thing I'm looking for. There's enough sort of context on the page. Helpful to understand context of use. Sometimes you hear the word contextual design. So I've got pretty good, I think most of the places I work tends to have pretty good lighting. I mostly work from my home office. When I'm not working in my home office, I've usually got enough control that I can find some place to sit where I've got decent lighting, but there's some place where you don't have any control. Polling locations. They're in school cafeterias, they're in libraries, they're in civic center buildings, and sometimes the lighting in the middle of the room is fantastic, but the place where you check in to vote, push towards the edge of the room, where maybe the lighting's not so good, and poll workers tend to be retirees. So those are all going to affect your design. Emergency response teams, high stress environment, variable lighting conditions, I would say yes, they might be in a very brightly lit room, they might be in a dimly lit room, it might be dark. I'll talk about some accessibility things a bit later on, but right, there are certain jobs that accommodations for disabilities don't matter because, like, someone who's blind is not going to be working in an EMT ambulance. So there are certain places where you don't need to worry about disabilities because they just don't apply to that situation. Healthcare settings can really run the gamut between just calmly checking into a doctor's office or, some checking in to get an x-ray done versus, right, what the emergency room intake might be slightly different. So again, these are questions that you can come in and, just kind of be asking, do we have this information? Do we really have a full set of different kinds of situations where this product might be used? And of course, understanding who your end users are, plural. That pretty much with anything that's got any amount of complexity, there's often different kinds of people, right? So this implies people who probably have to log in to get into the information, right? But you might have something that's set up in a school setting, and there's a place where students can go drop off their homework, pick up graded homework, see what assignments are out there. Teachers may also be able to then pick up what these students have dropped off, hand back the stuff that they've graded, maybe communicate with the parents. We haven't seen Billy in 7 days.
That never happens.
That never happens. Parents being able to come in and right there, and it's not like these are distinct, circles. There's overlap. I suspect a lot of those versus school examples, right? I suspect there's a lot of places where the parents can see, what assignments are coming up and whether or not Billy's actually been turning stuff in. But these are all different user groups, and this is going to matter later on if you're showing people mock-ups to get feedback. You want to make sure that you're showing things to the correct end user group.
Right.
Testing what it looks like from the student's perspective with someone who's administrative staff. Wow. So I think all that was things that I would, when I come into a project, that's the kind of questions I've got. And I think those are questions that anyone who's in a business analyst position can also be asking about.
Right.
Really trying to get a complete a picture as possible of where the thing that you're building, working on is going to get used. And who.
So as we do our stakeholder analysis and determine who's going to be using this product, we can add a couple of extra columns of how do they use it, which use cases would need to be considered. And then when we talk to them, of course, ask them, is there anything else you use it? Or is there any pain points? Or are there anything else you need to be added to it? Is all that right?
Yes. So when I get to usability tests, so I've got some slides later on kind of about observing people, how to get feedback in an effective way.
Good.
And it essentially comes down to observing people versus asking them, or you're at least observing and then probing when you start to see some issues where you're trying to tease out what the issue is without asking too many leading questions, which can be really tricky.
How do you do that?
I'm often saying words like, so I noticed you were flipping between two screens. Can you talk to me about that?
So you don't present them with a solution or a problem, you let them explain it.
I'm trying to get them, yes. And it's gold when they will just say, man, I have no idea what this word means. It's just some phrase. And sometimes they're, oh, I'm probably just being stupid. I'm just not sure here. And it's like, so that's part of the reassure. Yeah, I'm trying to get them to talk and see if they can articulate.
Jillian's asking, how much should metrics determine design?
What kind of metrics?
Yeah. Jillian, can you give us more information on that one? Tamara wants to know, how do you balance updating projects for end users when only a small selection needs a specific visual change versus a setup for a majority of your other users?
So if I understood, so hold on, there were two separate questions there, right? So one was you're making changes for one set of end users?
Yes. And they need a specific visual change, but then there's a whole nother majority of users.
So you've got a page that user groups A, B, and C, and D are all going to be using, but you need to make updates for this particular group, and you want to make sure it doesn't negatively impact your other groups.
Right.
Yeah, ideal world, you'd run a few casual testing sessions, informal testing sessions with all four of the groups.
There's also probably a long tail. You have a Pareto distribution of functions that are used most often by most people. And then you get into long tail stuff. But it's as Lynn points out, when two different groups of people are using the same thing for potentially different uses, that becomes more tricky.
I agree.
When you are making a change, you ideally want to make sure that it's going to work with all of your groups.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was another question there that I haven't gotten to.
Yeah, Pia loves different users and profiles and personas and racing, all that. So
I'm still waiting for a definition of matrix, and I don't see another question. So let's move forward.
I'm going to hit upon some UI design principles at the end of this bunch of slides. I've got 3, 4, or 5. I forget how many slides. I just started separating it out. But I've got some suggestions for internet searches you can do, because there's a bunch of different pages that's sort of like the 7 principles for web design, 10 things to consider of web standards. I'll hit upon some ones that I sometimes find myself, how do I say it, in discussion with the development team about. The first one is you do want to follow established conventions. And I have, the people that are using whatever you're building, they're not just using your thing, right? They're often using a whole bunch of other items. And so that sets their expectations for where things are going to be on a website.
We have about 8 more minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna fly then.
We'll stop interrupting you. Maybe.
There's something called the inverted triangle, which you're pulling your main points at the top. Grab and go. I often find that I'm having to sort of argue with people who are trained to be journalists or writers, and what they want to do is do these big long explanations before they finally get to the point. And that's really not what you do not want. If you ever do usability testing in person, if you have some dense paragraphs, you can sometimes literally see people like physically back away when they see the dense paragraph. You can see like, I don't want to read this. Chunking information via white space and bullets helps. If you think about how people are finding information, right? The word is satisficing. They're kind of skimming around like, okay, I think it's over here. Okay, I'm going to go down that path. Even down that path, they're continuing to assess, is this what I need? And then when they finally are convinced that this is what they need, at that point, they may be willing to read. Kind of depends on what it is. Other things to think about, sometimes peppering text with links may be a distractor. So if you have things that you really want to have people read, consider not putting links in there. If there are links to additional information, you can perhaps put those below the text. But if you really want them to consume something, bullet points, skip the links in there so you don't have people wandering off while you're trying to get them to absorb a particular important concept. I think this one tends to be pretty obvious, right? But the more error prevention you can do, there was a little bit of talk about this earlier, right? If you insist that the phone number has to be just digits, no dashes, no parentheses, etc., right? Tell people what that format is, rather than have them entering something and then the form comes back and complains and then they have to fix it. You do want to confirm destructive actions, but sometimes destructive actions are something you can easily recover from. If I take something out of my shopping cart, I can probably fix that pretty fast. If I'm, deleting something from my bank account register, maybe that's something that I, want to double check that, yes, I really did mean to do that. So you just want to consider what the penalty is, what the recovery is. Disabilities, the main thing I think you want to be aware is that blind is not the same as low vision, which is not the same as being colorblind. So someone who's blind will be using a screen reader, is going to be reading things. Low vision, someone who's low vision they may use the browser's ability to blow up the text. I've just played around with Firefox. I could take it up to 500%. And that may be sufficient for somebody to be able to then use that website. There are also applications that will blow up parts of the screen. Color blindness, you need to be aware of. Red, green is the main one. Cognition, that has to do with simplifying things to help people. And dexterity mostly tends to have to do with navigation. Somebody might be using a special kind of mouse, which just gives them the ability to kind of select or move to the next link. You just want to kind of be aware of this, because right, you're probably not doing the development yourself, but your developers need to have the correct skill set in terms of building in the accessibility. You should be building that in from day one. The last thing you want to do is build your product and then fail the accessibility requirements and then go back and have to backfill it. And at the end, I have some links to some resources on where to get that. Some of the accommodations are in the visual design, getting sufficient contrast that you don't have dark gray text on light gray background, which is hard to read. What size your text is, the target size, what your buttons are, what your icons are. If you're doing anything for the federal government, it does have everything on the website has to be accessible. And that includes documents. So if you've got Word docs, PDF, Excel files, etc., those all have to be accessible. One of the most important things you can do is develop UI guidelines. This often works well, right, as a little mini website. Take a look at this one here. I won't click on it now, but they've got some examples. They've just got a huge long list down the sides. How do you do accordions? How do you do menus? How do you do dialog boxes? All these user interface design elements. And so if you can get sort of a consistent library when you've got multiple developers and multiple, if you have more than one user interface designer, it means they're all working from the same. Yep.
If you can send me the link to these slides, I'll include it on the review page or the index page so everyone can go and research these directly.
Yep, I can do that. Functional testing, does the product do what it should? It's not the same as usability testing, which is can your end users use it? Again, I talked about this a little earlier, right? If you just say, how does it work for you? It's fine. It sucks. You've got zero information to work with. You really want to know the why. And I have often found, especially in usability testing, where people feel a little bit on the spot because they're often using the product with you there. They'll say, yeah, that was fine. Oh, I was just being stupid. Like, no, I saw you flipping between the screen 10 times between these two different screens. I know there was an issue there. Or I watched you enter the wrong information. So I do know there's an issue there. But people also don't tend to recall the specifics. So just having a conversation with them, like, how was it? You really want to observe them. Watch out for surveys. People often say, well, we'll just do a survey and see how people like it. And my experience is you rarely get anything useful out of that because you don't have the why. So this is the big thing, observing people with characteristics, right? The right kind of end users use the product, and you don't have to test the entire product. You can just have a few screens that you're getting feedback on. You want to know what's working well, what's difficult. And I can guarantee if you watch them, you will see these things, and you don't need to test 50 people. When I've got websites that have had some, some pretty clear problems, like I wasn't sure, but I thought maybe, we watch, 5 people and we're like, okay, yeah, that's a problem because every single person is running into this issue. You can also test along the development path. So I alluded to this earlier. As part of your sprints, you can have testing with mockups, with wireframes. And again, this doesn't have to be the entire website. You're right. You've got a series of things that happen when someone is submitting a form to do something. Can they find the form and then can they fill it out? And maybe that's 10 screens. You can put those in front of people. And these days you can now also put those in front of people with Zoom. And they can talk to you about where they think they would click. And again, you're probing for you're listening for the why when something's both a success and when it's not a success. And I know I'm racing along here. Mockups, they can be a hand drawing sometimes. They can be monochrome. Sometimes showing people mockups and monochromes means that you don't get the I don't like purple responses. I don't like blue. Every website's purple. I'm tired of blue. That's not what that conversation about color may happen later on, but you're interested in sort of the interaction and is that working? And monochrome can help you do that. You need to think about where you're going to need realistic data. I found when we were doing mock-ups for the patent examiners at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, if you had anything on the screen that wasn't realistic, they would catch it instantly because part of their job is to catch those things. And so you had to make sure that all your mock data was fit into the scenario you were painting for them. Accessibility. What you really want to get your hands around is section the W3C. It's called the WCAG. The current guidelines, I believe, are 2.2. They've got a bunch of resources. So if your developers don't know about this stuff, you can go point them in that direction. You know, internet searches for these kinds of terms will get you things. This is the contrast checker I use. There are others. You know, accessibility compliance testing, section 508 testing. These are things that you can stick into your internet search. So if you need additional resources for double checking that you're checking all the section 508 checkboxes, there are things out there to help with that. Some free, some cost money. It's worth taking a look at plainlanguage.gov. They talk about, at least for federal websites, but this is also, I think, universally trying to get things written in a way that's clear. UI design principles, there's a ton of stuff out there, and I didn't want to just kind of say, this is the best one. But, you know, mix and match these words and, you know, see what comes up, scan some things. This is kind of how I do cooking these days, right? So I plug in a recipe and then I read about 10 and then I sort of figure out which ones of those I thought were the best. Maybe I put something together that's a Frankenstein of them, but I think if you do this as well, you can get a fair amount of information on UI design principles. One of the things to be aware of, there are some guidelines that are outdated. So you want to, you know, was this a guideline from 2001, 2004? There was a period where we didn't write anything below the fold, heaven forbid, because you couldn't rely on people to scroll. What they figured what they were seeing was it. Oh, right. In mobile has particularly pushed the concept of you need to scroll, whether it's with your thumb flicking on your phone, but even on websites. But guidelines that seem to be more about just kind of human cognition, which, by the way, is not changing, you know, over the course of 20 years. So those will be relevant. These are the books that I think are really excellent. Don't Make Me Think, Rocket Surgery Made Easy. So that's talking about how, yes, you can do usability testing. I mean, you can hire a consultant to come in, but there's also plenty that you might find that people on your team can also be doing. Ginny Reddish has a great book on letting go of the words, just chop it down, chop, 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 chop. Carolyn Jarrett has a great book on how to, you know, doing forms that work well. There we go. That's how you reach me. Or you ask Bob.
All right. Well, Lynn, thank you so much. I have been surprised at, I do contracts, and I've been surprised how many times I'm the one called on to do the UI and UX because they didn't have anybody. They didn't even know it was a thing. So business analysts, it's our job to have a clue. Not only that this is necessary, it's necessary for the success of our projects, but it's also necessary for us to understand it so that we can talk to the folks that do UI and UX and see what they need from us and what we need from them and when to bring them in on the project, how early, etc. Things that are important to them. Thank you. UI Design Principles. We will put this link. Cliff, are you going to put this link in the marketing whenever you send it out?
What link? You mean the link?
The link to this, not the link to this presentation, so they can get the links.
I can, yeah, if we get the presentation, we can put it in our shared
I'll
drive.
put
Not
it
a problem.
on the index page on my site also.
Okay.
So it'll be semi-permanent.
Okay, awesome. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for participating in our little study group here. Just in case I didn't mention, the study group is recorded and people from all over the world watch it for months ongoing. And we do love it that you watch it. reach out to us if you have any questions. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have anything I can do to help you. And we will start, let's see, next week I will be presenting the thing that we presented at BBC, and we have some really cool stuff to show you. So I'm looking forward to seeing y'all next week. And well, have a good night. Bye, everyone.
Thank
night.
you. Night.
Bye.
Bye.